Jack Rayner had always believed his life would stay small and quiet. He fixed engines on transport ships and came home to a cramped apartment where the hum of the city drowned out his thoughts. It was not a bad life, but it was ordinary. Then, one night while he was finishing a cup of stale coffee, a message blinked across his holoscreen. It carried the seal of the Galactic Registry of Interstellar Affairs, and the first line made his pulse stop. "The estate of Kael'thar recognizes you as legal." Jack blinked and read it again. The name hit like a memory from another lifetime. Kael'thar, his alien friend, the one he had saved years ago during the Severian Frontier War. A warrior with scales like molten silver and a voice that sounded like thunder softened by rain. Jack had not heard from him in 3 years, and now this message spoke of an inheritance, a fortune, and something stranger. A personal bond registered under Valen. Jack tried to laugh it off, thinking it was a bureaucratic mistake. But the message repeated itself, authorized and encrypted with Kael'thar's unique biosignature. It was real. Kael'thar had died and left everything to him. Confusion battled grief inside Jack's chest. The last time they had spoken, Kael'thar had told him humanity's kindness would shape the stars. Jack thought it was just poetic talk. But maybe it meant more. Now the message also mentioned an item listed as spouse classification, biological entity named Lyra. He almost spilled his coffee. Lyra, Kael'thar's wife, that could not be right. How could a human inherit another man's wife? That made no sense. But the line was written in clear Valen trade code, the legal kind, that could not be mistranslated. For 2 nights Jack could not sleep. His mind kept looping back to that single word Kael'thar had once saved his life. In return for the favor, Jack had helped smuggle Valen refugees past the blockade. They had been more than friends, closer than brothers in the way only soldiers under fire could be. And now that brother had left behind a mystery and a legacy, Jack decided he had to go see it for himself, if not for curiosity, then out of respect. The journey to Valen Prime took 6 jumps and 3 days. His ship was old, but loyal, much like him. When the warp tunnel opened to the golden light of Valen space, Jack's breath caught. He had seen planets, but never anything like this. Oceans glittered with crystalline reefs. The cities rose like living sculptures, veins of light pulsing through organic towers. The sky shimmered as if the air itself carried energy. Valen Prime was not just alive, it was awake. At the arrival terminal, he was met by an attendant in flowing robes who introduced himself as Aryan legal executor of Kael'thar's estate. The alien bowed with hands pressed together and greeted him by name, saying, "Welcome, Jack Rayner, of Earth, the House of Thar. Honors your presence." Jack mumbled that he was just here to settle legal things, but Aryan smiled and said, "Inheritance is not only property here, it is promised. The estate awaits, and so does she." Jack frowned. She meaning Lyra. When he arrived at the estate, his ship set down on a platform that looked like glass and water. At once, Kael'thar's home was a sprawling construct, half palace, half living organism. Vines of blue crystal grew through walls that sang faintly in the wind. Jack followed Aryan through glowing corridors until they reached a great hall, and there he saw her standing near the edge of a pool where light danced across her skin. Lyra, Kael'thar's wife, she was unlike any being Jack had ever seen. Her eyes shone like molten amber. Her skin carried faint patterns that shifted like aurora. Her voice when she spoke was music and sadness woven together. She said, "You are the human." Kael spoke of his brother in war. Jack nodded awkwardly, saying, "I suppose I am. I came to settle his affairs. I am sorry for your loss." Lyra tilted her head slightly, grief and calm in her gaze. "He said you would come," she replied, "and that you would not believe what you had inherited." Jack frowned. The executor cleared his throat and explained under Valen law. Kael'thar's estate included all bonds, personal and spiritual, by his will. Lyra was transferred to Jack's protection until the bond could be dissolved or accepted. Jack's heart raced. He said, "I do not want to own anyone, especially not someone like her." But Lyra smiled faintly. "You cannot own a bond human. You can only honor it, or release it. Kael'thar trusted you." Jack looked around at the vast house glowing softly in the twilight. He felt small and out of place, yet something about the energy in the air seemed to hum inside him as if welcoming him home. Aryan handed him a small crystal cube, saying, "Kael'thar left messages for you. encoded memories and instructions. Only you can unlock the cube vibrated faintly in his palm. That night Jack could not sleep in the enormous room that overlooked an alien sea he played. Kael'thar's final message, the hologram flickered to life, showing the proud alien warrior looking older and weary. Kael'thar's voice spoke gently, "My brother of Earth, if you see this, I am gone. My world stands at a crossroad, I leave you my home. My wealth and my bond, not as burden but as key Lyra, is more than she seems, protect her, and you may yet save both our species." The message ended with static. Jack sat in silence, the sea below, glowing like liquid stars. Lyra's reflection shimmered. Behind him in the window, she said softly, "He believed in you, Jack Rayner. He said, humans carry something we do not understand." Jack turned to face her, confused and drawn at once. "What is that?" Lyra smiled faintly and said, "Heart the kind that does not yield." The wind blew warm across the terrace, and Jack felt the strange certainty that his life was about to change forever. Kael'thar's legacy was not about wealth or property. It was a bridge between two worlds, and somehow, he was standing right in the middle of it with the stars watching. Jack woke early to the sound of the alien sea whispering against the cliffs. The air was warm and bright with soft golden light that shimmered through the translucent walls of the estate he had dreamed. A voice is calling his name, not in English, but in a soft harmonic tone that felt like Kael'thar's laughter and Lyra's calm breath blending together. He stood on the balcony looking at the horizon where sky and water were the same color a planet, too beautiful to be real, yet filled with an emptiness that hung heavy without Kael'thar's presence. Lyra appeared behind him, moving like the wind. Her long hair floated as if touched by invisible currents. She carried a silver tray with something that looked like fruit yet glowed faintly. She said, "This nourishes body and mind the way your coffee once did on Earth." Jack smiled slightly, thanking her, but she looked puzzled at the word coffee. He tried to explain about bitter drinks and sleepless nights, and she listened with genuine curiosity, as if even small human habits fascinated her. She seemed gentle, yet distant. Her eyes watched him like someone remembering something they could not speak of. When he asked how long ago Kael'thar had passed, she answered, "A full moon cycle ago, yet I still feel his thoughts echoing in the bond he left behind. That bond is now shared with you." Jack stiffened, he said, "I never asked for this, Lyra. I only came to do what is right and return to Earth." But she shook her head softly. "You misunderstand. Kael'thar did not bind me to you in the way humans fear. He bound his legacy and his trust. The law only records it as a bond because no Velan can inherit what carries life essence without a living counterpart." They walked through the garden that seemed to hum with energy. Flowers opened as Lyra passed and faint lights followed her footsteps. Jack realized the estate itself responded to her. She was part of it, connected in ways no machine could measure. He wondered if Kael'thar had designed it this way. Maybe he had built a living home to protect her from loneliness. Jack felt both honored and uneasy. Arian, the executor, arrived carrying a briefcase shaped like folded light. He bowed again and said, "The estate will now recognize you as master by voice and intent." Jack felt embarrassed by the word master, but Arian continued, "Your authorization allows access to Kael'thar's archives and restricted vaults. The vault holds not only wealth, but research left unfinished." Jack followed Arian into a chamber deep below the main hall. It opened like a flower, revealing floating panels and shifting energy patterns. Kael'thar's symbol glowed across the room. A spiral within a flame, Arian explained that this was the Heart Archive, a living record of thoughts and experiments preserved through bioresonance. Kael'thar's last projects involved merging human and Velan biology through emotional frequency. Jack frowned, remembering the time he had donated blood to save Kael'thar after the battle. Kael'thar had joked that their blood might one day rewrite destiny, but Jack never knew it was more than a joke. Arian gestured toward a console, saying, "The system will respond to your touch only then. Can it reveal the data Kael'thar left unfinished?" Jack hesitated, then placed his hand on the pad. The surface pulsed warm light up his arm, and a holographic image formed around him. He saw Kael'thar smiling, his deep voice saying, "If you are here, then the bridge has begun. You once said humanity's weakness is emotion. I told you it is your weapon. Remember this when the cold ones come. The image faded, leaving Jack shaken. He asked Arian, "Who are the cold ones?" Arian hesitated before answering Krythos. They were Kelthar's rivals, old as the stars. Their creed denies emotion. They believe unity means control. Kelthar opposed them. His death was sudden, too sudden. Lyra entered quietly, her face pale. "They killed him," she whispered. "Not illness, not time. Their shadows moved through our halls before he died. He sent me away." Jack felt anger rise like fire. He clenched his fists, saying, "Then we find proof. We show the council." Lyra looked away. "No council will hear us. Kelthar's enemies hold the courts and the fleets. They already suspect that his energy work broke ancient laws. If they learn that his bond with you, a human, exists, they will destroy both of us." Jack stared at her, unable to believe what he was hearing. "So you're saying Kelthar's research, his entire legacy, is illegal?" She nodded softly. "It is forbidden to merge essence across species. But Kelthar believed it could heal the void between worlds." For a long moment they stood in silence, broken only by the hum of the Heart Archive. Jack said quietly, "I'm not leaving. Not now. Kelthar trusted me and I won't run from a fight." Lyra looked at him, her eyes bright with emotion. "You sound like him when you speak of duty, but this is not your world." Jack Rayner. He stepped closer, saying, "Maybe it is now. Outside the estate." The sky darkened. Strange ships moved in low orbit, their outlines faint like sharks circling the depths. The planet's defense grids flickered as if jammed. Lyra felt it first, the vibration, in her bones a resonance that matched her heartbeat. She said, "They are here already, the Krathos." Jack looked up through the translucent roof and saw the distant glow of descending vessels. He felt the old fear from his soldier days crawl back, but beneath it something new, a steady warmth rising in his chest as if Kelthar's spirit whispered courage. He turned to Lyra, saying, "If they want this estate, they'll have to go through me." She gave a small smile, fierce and sad at once. "You may regret." Those words human. She reached out and touched his hand. The air shimmered between their palms. Light flowed from her skin to his. He felt it like electricity mixed with heartbeat. His breath caught. Lyra said softly, "The bond recognizes your choice." In that instant, the estate itself seemed to wake. Light surged through the walls and the hum deepened into a living rhythm. Arian's eyes widened. The system has accepted him. Kelthar's code is alive again. The house responded to Jack as if welcoming. Its new guardian, and somewhere far above the Krythos ships, changed course, tracking the energy flare they had just unleashed. Jack did not know yet what this meant, only that he felt something ancient and powerful moving inside him. Not magic, not machine, but something human shaped by alien hands, a bridge that pulsed with life and promise. He looked at Lyra and saw not a stranger, not Kelthar's widow, but a partner in the storm that was about to break. And as the night sky filled with approaching light, he knew his inheritance had only just begun. The night stretched long and heavy over the glowing estate. The alien sea beneath the cliffs shimmered with faint green light, and each wave seemed to hum like a quiet heartbeat. Jack could not sleep. He kept pacing near the window where the strange stars of Valen Prime painted silver trails in the sky. He felt both alive and restless. The events of the day replayed in his mind. Kelthar's hidden message, the warning about the Krythos, the strange bond that now pulsed faintly in his chest like a second heartbeat connected to Lyra, who moved silently through the halls below. He could hear her faint steps echoing in rhythm with the sound of the sea. She never seemed tired. Her movements were slow and fluid like water itself. Jack watched her through the reflection of the glass, wondering what she truly felt. She had lost a husband, and now stood beside a human stranger who was bound to her by alien law. When she looked up at him, their eyes met across the vast room, and Jack felt something pass between them. Not words, but an understanding that both were trapped in something larger than themselves. At dawn, the sky turned a deep amber, and the first light touched the crystalline towers. In the distance, Arian appeared again with a small convoy of drones, each carrying supplies and scrolls of light. He said quietly that Kael'thar's last research files had been decoded overnight, but only Jack could access them, the system recognized. His human pattern as the missing key. Arian explained that Kael'thar had believed human emotion could stabilize the unstable energy, known as bioresonance, that Velan technology could not sustain without burning out. Kael'thar had written in his notes that human empathy was not weakness but the exact opposite, a balancing force that even the most advanced minds could not replicate. Jack tried to understand, but science had never been his strong side. Still, when he placed his hand on the glowing panel, the system came alive again with lines of energy rising into the air around him like living data. The voice of Kael'thar filled the room. "You once asked why we call you brothers." Kael'thar's image said, "Because you feel more than you fear. That is power beyond our kind." Jack stood motionless as the light formed a pattern in front of him. A map of energy lines spreading across the planet. At its center was a pulsing shape labeled Core Seed. "It looked alive," Arian said in awe. "That is the living heart of the House of Thar. It contains the consciousness of generations and the energy that Kael'thar tried to merge with human resonance." Before Jack could ask more, the alarms echoed through the estate, the walls flickered red, and Lyra appeared. Her voice calm but her eyes sharp. "Krythos probes near the outer gates. They found us." Arian cursed softly, saying, "Their detection systems must have caught the signal when you activated the archives." Jack's stomach twisted. He said, "How many?" Lyra closed her eyes, listening through the resonance, and replied, 5 scouts, but more will come." Jack moved fast, his soldier instincts returning. He grabbed the old pulse rifle Kael'thar had given him long ago. It felt heavy but familiar. They ran through the corridors, the estate's defenses awakening as they moved. Walls shifted to form barriers. Energy shields grew from the floors. The air buzzed with tension. Lyra guided him through paths that seemed alive, every turn responding to her presence. She said, "The estate obeys. Whoever holds the bond, your energy strengthens it. Now use that connection. Think of defense, not fear." Jack took a deep breath and focused, imagining the estate as an ally protecting them. The lights brightened, responding. To his thought, a barrier sealed the gates just as the first Krythos drone smashed against it. In a burst of sparks, from the terrace they saw them, silver-black machines like insects with blades for wings moving in precise swarms. Lyra raised her hand and the air shimmered. She sang softly, a tone that resonated with the walls around them. Jack felt it through the bond like warmth spreading through his veins. The drones faltered, confused by the resonance. He fired the rifle, hitting 2 of them. The recoil jarred his shoulder, but he kept going. The battle felt unreal, the fusion of human instinct and alien energy, creating something neither species could fully understand. When it was over, the courtyard lay in ruins, fragments of the drones still crackling with blue fire. The barrier faded slowly. Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted. Jack ran to her side, helping her up. She looked pale, her pulse faint beneath the skin that now glowed softly. She whispered, "The bond drains me when we fight. Together it shares more than strength." Jack nodded, breathing hard, saying, "Then we rest together until it returns." She looked at him, surprised by the warmth in his voice. For a long moment, neither spoke. Later that evening, Arian brought grim news. The Krythos had not retreated. They had transmitted a signal into orbit calling reinforcements. Velan authorities would not help. Because Kael'thar's experiments were forbidden, they were on their own. Jack sat in the great hall, staring at Kael'thar's holographic portrait above the mantel. Kael'thar had always talked about the bridge between species, a union built not on power but on choice. Now Jack realized that dream was being tested. He turned to Lyra, saying, "We can't just hide. They'll come again, and next time they'll bring more." She nodded, her voice steady. Kael'thar's note spoke of an old sanctuary in the eastern mountains. It was where he first studied the resonance. "There may be something there, something he left for us," Jack said. "Then we go at dawn before sleep." They stood on the balcony, the stars blazing brighter than ever. Lyra said quietly, "When Kael'thar brought me to this world, he said, humans carry the song of chaos and order mixed together. Now I see what he meant. You move through fear, yet you do not bow to it. Jack smiled faintly, saying, "Maybe that's just stubbornness." She looked at him a long moment, her voice soft. "No, it is heart. The one thing the universe still does not understand." The next morning they, prepared for the journey, the estate stored Kael'thar's artifacts and treasures into a secure vault, while drones loaded their small shuttle. The air was tense, but filled with quiet determination. Jack looked one last time at the sea that shimmered with light. Kael'thar's voice echoed again in his memory. "You once said you had no destiny, brother. Perhaps you were wrong." As the shuttle rose through the mist, the estate pulsed once more as if alive, bidding them farewell. The bond between Jack and Lyra hummed steady inside their chests, guiding them toward the unknown mountains where answers waited and danger gathered. And as the first sun rose over Valen Prime, Jack felt the weight of the legacy settle on his shoulders. Not a fortune, not a prize, but a promise written in the language of courage and heart. The shuttle cut through the thin clouds of Valen Prime, the eastern mountains rising like jagged spines through the mist. Jack gripped the railing as the wind screamed past the open hatch. The air smelled of ozone and metal and something older, something that hummed with hidden life beside him. Lyra sat calm, her fingers brushing against the control panel, every movement precise, as if she could feel the currents of the planet flowing through the machine. She said quietly, "The sanctuary is not far. The bond guides us," and Jack felt the pulse of energy between them, steady and insistent like a heartbeat. He realized that every choice he made resonated through the bond, every fear, and every thought shaping the world around them. The mountains grew closer. Their jagged peaks pierced the low clouds, and the first sight of the sanctuary appeared. It was carved into living stone. The walls shimmered faintly like veins of energy, flowing through rock. It was ancient and silent, yet full of life. The Krythos would never have expected a place like this to exist, hidden from orbit, yet alive and aware. Jack felt a strange sense of peace wash over him as the shuttle touched down, and the ramp lowered, revealing stairways carved into glowing stone. They stepped onto the ancient steps, Jack carrying the pulse rifle, and Lyra carrying a small satchel of tools. Kael'thar's journals and encoded devices. The air hummed faintly in response to their presence, like the mountains themselves recognized them as heirs of something greater. The silence was broken only by distant echoes that might have been wind or whispers of the mountain. Jack had never felt so aware of every sound, every vibration beneath his feet. The bond thrummed with energy, the pulse between them guiding their steps inside the sanctuary. The walls were lined with murals that told stories. Jack could not fully read. The symbols were Valen, yet some patterns mirrored human gestures, shapes that seemed to exist in memory rather than logic. Lyra ran her hands across the walls, tracing the lines, and she whispered, "This is Kael'thar's work. From before he met you, when he first studied human resonance, he wrote the mountains would respond to heart and courage, not force." Jack felt a chill, thinking that the Krythos had never considered the strength of human emotion as a weapon. They reached the central chamber where a crystal pedestal floated above. A shallow pool of luminescent water. Lyra stepped forward and said, "Kael'thar called this the Nexus. It holds the key to stabilizing the core seed and channeling the bond." Jack approached cautiously, placing his hands on the pedestal. Immediately, a pulse of energy shot through his body. Not painful, but awakening. He felt his thoughts intertwine with Lyra's, the bond between them growing stronger. The chamber responded to every emotion, every subtle change in their heartbeat patterns. The crystals glowed brighter, as if feeding on courage and trust. Jack realized that Kael'thar had designed this as a training ground, not only for knowledge, but for the soul. Suddenly the floor trembled. A low hum grew into a roar. The distant approach of Krythos, ships shaking the mountains. Jack grabbed Lyra's hand. "We cannot stay," she said. "The resonance here can guide us, but the energy will drain if we leave too soon." Jack nodded together. They moved deeper into the sanctuary halls, the walls bending subtly, as if leading them toward hidden passages. Jack felt the pulse of the bond grow with urgency, and he realized that they could not only hide here, they could fight from here, using the resonance to their advantage. In the outer chamber, scouts from the Krythos broke through the first layer of natural defenses. Jack and Lyra could hear the metallic scrape of their boots, and the faint hum of energy weapons scanning the walls. They reached a hidden alcove where Kael'thar's notes indicated a defensive matrix could be activated. Lyra placed her hand on a carved panel, and Jack followed her every heartbeat syncing with hers. The air around them thickened, the walls pulsing with light, and the sound of the approaching Krythos seemed to slow, as if time itself bent to the bond between them. When the first Krythos soldier appeared at the entrance, the chamber flared with energy light streaming from the walls like blades. Jack fired his rifle through the energy pulse, stunning the intruder. The machine stumbled, unable to recalibrate to the resonance wave Lyra's voice carried through the hall. The tone pure and unwavering, sending a ripple through the chamber that disoriented the others. The sanctuary itself became a shield and a weapon. Moving with them, guiding their actions, Jack had never felt such power flowing through him. The human part of him that feared everything became sharp and precise. Hours passed in a blur. The sanctuary kept them alive. The Krythos persistent and clever, yet every move they made was countered by the living architecture responding to Jack and Lyra's bond. They moved through hidden corridors, ambushing small groups, and shutting doors with energy pulses that left the intruders disoriented and frustrated. The bond grew each time they acted together, each rescue and each defense deepening the connection between them. The pulse of the mountains echoed the rhythm of their hearts, and Jack realized that Kael'thar's belief in human emotion as a force was true. At one point, Lyra collapsed from exhaustion. The energy drain intense, Jack lifted her into his arms. Feeling the bond pulse strongly between them, he whispered, "You are safe with me." She smiled faintly, the first time he saw emotion in her face that was not grief or wariness, but trust. The bond shimmered around them as they moved to a smaller chamber where natural springs glowed faintly, and energy streams coiled through the walls. Jack placed Lyra down gently and felt the strange comfort of the place, the resonance feeding both of them not only with power but with connection and clarity. Through the night, they rested little and listened to the subtle vibrations of the mountains preparing themselves for the coming assault. Jack's mind was clear. Despite the exhaustion, he understood now that they were not merely defending themselves. They were continuing Kael'thar's work, proving that human courage and empathy could shape even alien energy systems. The sanctuary itself seemed to acknowledge this truth as the light in the walls pulsed steady like a heartbeat matching theirs. As dawn approached, the sound of approaching ships returned stronger and faster. Lyra stood beside Jack, her hand brushing against his, the bond thrumming like a living thing. They shared a glance filled with unspoken understanding that this fight would test everything Kael'thar had left behind. Yet they would face it together, not as master and ward, but as partners guided by trust and courage. Jack looked out through the translucent rock and said softly, "Whatever comes, we will not yield." Lyra nodded, and the pulse of the bond surged between them, carrying the promise of a legacy that no enemy could extinguish. The morning air of the eastern mountains was crisp and carried the faint hum of Velan energy through every stone and crystal. Jack and Lyra emerged from the sanctuary, their bodies still pulsing from the resonance that had kept them alive through the night, and Krythos forces were regrouping in the valleys below, small ships darting like black insects between jagged peaks. But the sanctuary had shown them something no machine could calculate: the bond between human and Velan, a pulse of life and courage that could not be copied. Lyra led Jack to a small chamber carved into living rock where the walls glowed faintly with lines of ancient script. Her hands traced the energy patterns, teaching him how to channel the bond. Jack felt the warmth spread through his veins like liquid fire, every thought of fear or hesitation fading until only focus and instinct remained. She said softly, "The human heart is unpredictable. It cannot be measured or contained, yet it shapes energy with precision." Jack nodded, feeling the truth of her words. A rhythm began to form between them, a pattern. Small at first, a subtle beat in their breathing, their footsteps, their gestures, and the sanctuary responded, the walls lighting in tune with the pulse of their emotions. Jack realized that Kael'thar had left them a key not only to survive, but to turn human unpredictability into strength. If they synchronized perfectly, their bond could amplify the energy in the sanctuary and send it outward, disrupting the Krythos systems before they could even reach the valley floor. They practiced in silence, moving through the chambers, learning the rhythm of heart and breath, learning the cadence of trust and courage. Jack could feel the pulse of Lyra beside him, and for the first time she seemed not like a possession or inheritance but a partner, a reflection of his own strength. The bond was no longer just a legal or spiritual connection. It had become living and responsive to every thought and emotion as the day progressed. The distant hum of Kratos reinforcements grew louder, scouts appearing in small bursts testing the defenses. Jack and Lyra waited in the hidden corridors of the sanctuary, their hands occasionally brushing as they synchronized, their breathing and energy to the pulse of the living walls. The first wave of drones appeared sharp and swift, but as soon as they approached the sanctuary, they faltered, the energy in the walls reacting faster than any computation. The drones spun in place, confused, their targeting systems failing. Jack fired on 2 of them, instinct and training. Blending with the pulse of energy flowing through him, Lyra's voice carried a note that resonated in the walls, and the drones fell silent in confusion, the bond guiding every move and every decision. Hours passed like this, every encounter, testing their patience and focus, every success, strengthening the pulse between them. Jack noticed a subtle change in Lyra, her movements fluid and confident, her energy stable yet powerful, and he felt his own fear and hesitation melting away, replaced with something sharper, clearer. And when they touched hands to synchronize the energy fully, he could feel her life force merging with his own. The bond had grown beyond Kelthar's original design. It was not just a link, but a living partnership, a bridge between human courage and Velen precision that neither species could replicate alone. By nightfall, Jack and Lyra stood on the terrace of the sanctuary, watching the black ships mass in the valley below. The Kratos had assembled a fleet of hundreds scanning for the pulse of the sanctuary. Jack said quietly, "We cannot fight them head-on." Lyra nodded. "The bond is the key, not brute force. The energy must ride the rhythm, the pulse that only a human heart can produce." She gestured toward the central chamber where the Nexus floated and glowed, waiting for them together. They stepped inside Jack, placing his hands on the pedestal and Lyra beside him, feeling the resonance surge, their minds aligning with the rhythm of each other's heartbeat. Every thought and emotion feeding the pulse, the walls of the sanctuary pulsing brighter than ever, energy rising in waves that extended outward through the mountains. The first Kratos ships entered the valley. The energy wave hit them before they could fire, systems stalling and shields flickering. The fleet faltered as if the pulse had rewritten their operational code. Jack realized with awe that Kelthar had built more than a sanctuary. He had built a living weapon powered not by violence but by emotion and cooperation. And when he glanced at Lyra, she was smiling, faintly exhausted but strong, her eyes reflecting the light of the pulsing crystals. She said softly, "The human key works." Jack felt a surge of pride and determination. This was not about inheritance or obligation. It was about proving that courage and empathy could shape the outcome of the universe together. They moved through the Nexus, stepping closer to the edge of the chamber where energy flowed unchecked, the sanctuary amplifying every move and every heartbeat. The Kratos reacted, sending the next wave forward, small drones and ground troops swarming toward the sanctuary. But the pulse of the bond was unstoppable, every attack faltering as the living energy guided Jack's instincts. Lyra's voice rose in a note that harmonized with the crystal walls, and the attackers faltered further, systems failing entirely, drones spinning in place, unable to recalibrate. Jack moved with precision, instinct flowing with emotion rather than cold calculation. Every shot and action magnified by the resonance of the bond. They had become more than human, and Velen together they were a force no machine could predict. By the time the second wave approached the valley floor, the pulse of the bond had grown strong enough to reach beyond the mountains, disabling communications and navigation systems for the Kratos ships. Jack and Lyra watched from the terrace, the black fleet scattered in confusion, the bond humming between them stronger than ever. Jack realized they had surpassed Kelthar's expectation. The rhythm was no longer a tool, but a declaration that human courage and Velen wisdom together could turn the tide against even the most formidable enemy. Lyra looked at him and whispered quietly, "We are ready for the final test." Jack nodded, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. Their bond now, alive and unstoppable. The first light of dawn spread over the jagged peaks of the eastern mountains, illuminating the sanctuary with a warm golden glow. Jack and Lyra stood side by side on the terrace, the bond between them thrumming strong as ever. The valley below teemed with Kratos ships, black and silent like shadows moving with deadly intent. The sanctuary hummed in response to their presence, the living walls shifting and pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. Jack felt every beat of Lyra's pulse as if it were his own. Every thought and instinct merged into one steady current of energy. They moved to the central chamber, the Nexus glowing brighter than ever, the floating crystals spinning slowly in perfect alignment. Lyra's voice rose in a note that carried through the air, amplifying the pulse of the bond. The energy raced through the halls of the sanctuary, surging outward into the mountains and down into the valley below. The first wave of Kratos ships faltered, systems failing their weapons silent and drones spinning in confusion. Jack fired at the closest machines, every movement precise instinct guided by the pulse. Lyra beside him, her hands on the control panel, directing energy with finesse and focus. The bond between them now more than legacy. It was partnership, it was proof of everything Kael'thar had believed about human courage. The Kratos fleet regrouped, sending a second wave heavier and faster. Jack felt the tension in his chest tighten, but it was different than fear. It was focus, pure and steady. Lyra reached for his hand, their fingers brushing. Sending a surge of energy through the bond, the sanctuary responded. The walls pulsing and bending, guiding Jack's actions, every heartbeat. Every thought creating waves of energy that rippled through the attacker system's drones, faltering shields collapsing one by one. Jack felt the rhythm of battle flowing through him, every instinct aligned with Lyra. Every shot finding its mark. They moved through the Nexus into a narrow corridor overlooking the valley below. Jack's pulse raced with adrenaline, yet steady. With the bond guiding him, the Kratos soldiers on the ground tried to advance, but the energy from the sanctuary rose like living waves, pushing them back, machines faltering, unable to process the unpredictability of human and Velan resonance. The bond had become a living code. No calculation could break, every pulse amplified by trust, courage, and focus. Jack realized Kael'thar had left them the ultimate weapon, and they were wielding it not for destruction, but for survival and defense. Hours passed in a blur, the sanctuary alive around them, the energy rising to levels Jack had never imagined. The Kratos fleet, now disorganized and in disarray. Their weapons firing erratically, missiles missing targets. The humans and Velan forces that had hidden in the valleys below, beginning to move forward, joining the pulse of energy with improvised devices. The bond extended beyond Jack and Lyra, reaching those who trusted and followed their rhythm. Every footstep, every gesture, every note of voice, adding to the tide of energy sweeping the valley, the sanctuary guiding them. All. Lyra leaned close, whispering, "They can reach the core." Jack nodded, understanding her intent. The final wave of Kratos ships was approaching the central plateau, their shields and weapons coordinated to break the sanctuary's defenses. They could not know that the rhythm of human emotion and Velan precision now flowed through a living network. Jack placed his hand on the central crystal, and Lyra mirrored his motion. The bond pulsing through the Nexus, a single living heartbeat that reached the sky above and the valley below, energy racing outward with unstoppable momentum. The Kratos flagship entered the valley, the largest ship with weapons capable of leveling mountains. Jack and Lyra felt the pulse respond. Their minds synchronized, the sanctuary itself becoming a conduit for the energy. The pulse moving through their bodies, every heartbeat a strike, every breath a command. The energy enveloping the flagship like a living net. The machines on board, faltering systems shutting down weapons, misfiring energy shields collapsing. In waves, Jack and Lyra could feel the resonance extending even beyond the fleet, the bond connecting them to every living thing that trusted in their pulse. The culmination of Kael'thar's work realized in human courage. On the terrace, Jack turned. To Lyra, their faces illuminated by the pulsing crystals, the bond thrumming stronger than ever. "We can finish this together," she said, and he nodded, knowing they had to strike the final note. The pulse reached the crescendo, the sanctuary alive with power and resonance, the Kratos ships faltering under the living code, unable to process the unpredictable pattern of emotion and courage sent outward like a wave of light. Jack fired the pulse rifle aligned with the Nexus, channeling every ounce of energy through him. Lyra's voice rose in harmony, amplifying the effect. The flagship's shields finally collapsed, the energy overwhelming their systems. The ship falling into the valley, unable to recover, smaller vessels following in confusion. The battle ended in silence except for the hum of the sanctuary. Jack and Lyra stood side by side, exhausted yet alive, the bond between them steady and warm. The valley below, strewn with disabled drones and ships, the human and Valen forces emerging, slowly watching in awe as the pulse of energy diminished. The Krythos fleet scattered in retreat. Jack felt a strange calm wash over him. The legacy Kael'thar had left them not only survived, but had triumphed, proving that human courage and Valen wisdom together could challenge even the most advanced enemy. Lyra placed her hand on Jack's shoulder, whispering quietly, "We did what he believed we could." Jack nodded, looking over the valley, seeing the survivors beginning to help each other, the pulse between them a quiet rhythm, now that had carried them through the storm. He realized then that this was more than victory. It was proof that the bond between two worlds could overcome even the darkest forces that threatened them. The sanctuary, quieting around them, glowing softly in approval. As night fell over the mountains, Jack and Lyra returned to the central chamber, the Nexus dimming but still warm with life. The bond steady and gentle now, a reminder of what had been achieved and what could still be done together. Jack looked at Lyra, realizing that Kael'thar had trusted him, not just to protect a legacy, but to honor it through courage, empathy, and partnership. The human heart and Valen precision had proven unstoppable, and together they had become more than heirs. They had become the bridge Kael'thar had always dreamed of, and the stars above Valen Prime seemed to shimmer in response to the pulse of their bond, the dawn of a new era for two worlds beginning with a single heartbeat. The morning light spilled over the jagged peaks of Valen Prime, painting the mountains in gold and violet. Jack stood on the terrace of the sanctuary, his hand brushing against Lyra's, her presence steadying him after the chaos of battle. The bond between them now quiet but alive, a rhythm of trust and understanding that no machine or enemy could break below the valley. The remnants of the Krythos fleet limped away, retreating into the dark spaces between stars. Their systems crippled, the survivors looking on with awe as human and Valen forces worked together to rescue those caught in the skirmishes and repair the damage. The sanctuary itself pulsed softly, as if acknowledging the victory as not just theirs, but a triumph of courage and unity. Jack turned to Lyra and said softly, "We did it." She smiled faintly, her eyes warm and reflective. "Kael'thar trusted us to carry this through, and I think we have." She reached for his hand, the bond thrumming gently, sending a calm warmth through both of them. Together they walked through the sanctuary, the walls glowing softly with the energy that had carried them through the storm, the ancient corridors echoing faintly with the pulse of their footsteps. Jack felt a quiet pride that Kael'thar's vision had been realized not through weapons or fleets but through trust, courage, and the unpredictable strength of a human heart. Arian appeared, carrying data crystals from the valley, reports of the surviving Krythos forces and the scattered equipment. Jack took them in his hands, feeling the weight of responsibility not as a burden, but as a promise. The bond with Lyra hummed softly, a reminder that they were connected to something far larger than themselves. The reports showed the enemy retreating beyond communications range and the human and Valen forces emerging as allies, helping each other in ways Jack had never imagined possible. He realized that Kael'thar's dream of unity between species was no longer theory. It was reality, alive and breathing through their actions. They walked to the outer courtyard where humans and Velans were gathering, sharing food, water, and medical supplies. The children laughed despite the scars of the previous battles, their voices carrying through the valley in harmony with the pulse of the sanctuary. Jack felt something shift inside him, a sense of completion that went beyond victory. It was the understanding that courage and compassion together could shape the future, and he looked at Lyra, realizing that their bond was not just a tool for survival but a foundation for the world to come. Lyra turned to him, her voice quiet but firm. "Jack, you have a choice. Now the bond can remain or it can be dissolved." Jack looked at her, understanding the depth of her words. This was no longer about inheritance or duty. It was about choice. Kael'thar had left them connected to protect and guide, and now it was up to them to decide how that bond would shape the future. He felt the pulse of the bond in his chest steady and warm, and he said, "I choose to honor it with you." She smiled fully now, a smile that carried relief, joy, and recognition. Their hands clasped, and the energy between them strengthened, solidifying, not obligation but mutual respect and love. The rebuilding of Velan Prime began slowly but with purpose. Jack and Lyra worked together, opening the sanctuary to those who wished to learn the ways of the bond, to study the integration of human courage and Velan energy. The towns and cities that had been damaged were repaired with help from both species, and Jack saw the transformation not only of buildings, but of hearts, humans, and Velans, sharing skills, knowledge, and culture. The pulse of the bond between him and Lyra became a symbol, a living reminder that unity and trust could overcome even the greatest threats. Weeks passed, and the final remnants of the Krythos threat disappeared beyond the outer rim, leaving Velan Prime and its allies free to rebuild and prosper. Jack and Lyra spent long hours in the sanctuary studying Kael'thar's archives, discovering ways to expand the bond, safely sharing knowledge with those willing to learn. It was a partnership of discovery and protection. Jack felt a quiet fulfillment he had never known before, knowing that the choice to act with courage had not only preserved life, but shaped the future, and that the bond with Lyra was no longer inherited responsibility, but chosen connection, a living testament to Kael'thar's trust. One evening, they stood on the highest balcony of the sanctuary, watching the twin moons rise over the mountains. The light reflected off the crystalline towers in the distance. Jack said quietly, "Lyra, I never thought my life would lead here." She smiled, her hand finding his, and squeezed gently. "Yet here we are together," he nodded, feeling the steady pulse of their connection, the rhythm, a quiet hum of life and trust around them. And she said softly, "Kael'thar believed in you and in all of this, and now so do I." As the moons climbed higher, Jack realized that the legacy he had inherited was not wealth, not power, but understanding, love, and courage that could shape worlds. The human heart had proven to be more than fragile. It was a force unstoppable when united with wisdom and trust. He looked at Lyra and felt a calm certainty that the future was theirs to protect and guide together. The bond between them, a living bridge connecting two species and two hearts. Velan Prime began to flourish in ways that had not been possible before. Humans and Velans working side by side, learning from one another, sharing life in harmony. The cities and the countryside thrummed with energy and hope. The sanctuary stood at the center, a beacon of the bond Jack and Lyra nurtured, teaching others that courage, empathy, and connection could overcome even the darkest forces. The stars above seemed to shine brighter, reflecting the unity below, and Jack knew that Kael'thar's vision had not only survived, it had grown. Jack and Lyra watched the sun rise over the mountains one final time, the light bathing the sanctuary in warmth and life. He felt her hand in his, and the pulse of the bond steady and strong. She said quietly, "Together." Jack said together, and they smiled, a quiet understanding passing between them, that their journey was far from over. Yet they had survived the storm, they had honored the legacy, and they had proven that human courage was a force the universe could not ignore. The wind whispered across the mountains, carrying faint echoes of Kael'thar's voice, and Jack realized that the inheritance had never been about fortune or property. It had been about trust, courage, and heart, and that those gifts had shaped not just their lives but the future of two worlds. He looked at Lyra and said softly, "We have done what he asked." She nodded and said yes, and now we build what comes next together. The sanctuary pulsed one last time, a quiet approval, and as the dawn rose fully over Velan Prime, Jack felt peace and hope flowing through him, and he knew that humanity's heart had truly saved the day.